Hey there, everybody. It's your old pal, Steve Kosminski. If you can hear me, go ahead and pop something in the comments. If you are live, as we are going live at about 4:25 p.m. on the East Coast, here on December 31st, 2025. New Year's Eve, my favorite of all the holidays. I like to take a minute to reflect on the last year, as I think a lot of us do. Not so big on resolutions. I think those are kind of fallen out of favor anyway for years and years now because, nobody likes to keep to resolutions, but, they have their value. I feel like you should maybe resolve to do things more like vaguely, like be more productive rather than write 7 books or something like that. So it's been quite a year. On my personal front, it's been just a terrible year, as I'm sure it has been for a lot of people. But I don't want to go into too much of that publicly for various reasons. Oh, Laura J. Hickman says hello. Hello, Laura. How are you doing? So we'll kind of leave that be. I don't know. Actually, I can't remember if I even did this last year. Maybe not. But I did get married. I did get married to my longtime girlfriend in December of 24. So if you notice the ring on the finger now, that's what that's all about. I don't know why. I was just noticing it when I picked up my glass of water there. So that's changed. Our first full year as a married couple. So, that was very nice. I'm talking more about my my day job, that sort of thing. It was not super productive for writing. I did notice when I got to the end of the year, I wasn't quite as productive as I have been some years. And that, to me, seems like a lack of short stories. So I think I was not pushing quite as many short stories this year, because usually I have like 5, 6, 7 things, that I'm looking at the end of the year. And this year I only had one short story, and I was like, oh, well, that's what happened. You had one short story, and you published it yourself, and you didn't get anybody else's books. Laura says, good, hope you're more good than bad. Yeah, I'd say so. I always enjoy New Year's Eve. That's like I said at the beginning, it's my favorite holiday. So, that being said, French press, which is my personal press, we do publish a few other people now and then within like the bounds of my financial restraints, which I feel like I've been explaining this more and more lately. But I think the problem with a lot of small presses is they don't stay within their financial constraints, and if they have one book go bust, their whole company goes bust, and they don't pay their authors. So I try to keep it very, very small. And I guess what happened in 2025 has kind of informed that for me to keep it even smaller than usual, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we kicked off the year by releasing our second anthology, which was Strange New Moons. So that came out on January 25th of 2025. And that was a werewolf anthology, and it featured some amazing authors, Simon Clark, Mary Sangiovanni, Tim Levin. It was a lot more UK themed, which is also one of the things I'm trying to do with French press, is kind of try and bridge that gap between the UK and the US audiences as best I can. Because I've noticed that there's kind of a gap there, and I feel like maybe there's space for me to work on filling that. So it featured one of my stories, which I've talked to a few people. Some people find that gauche. Some people say, who gives a shit? And I always lean towards the whatever. If we did a Kickstarter or a fundraiser for our anthology, why not pay ourselves for it, as well, is the way I look at it. I always come out of pocket on these things. Our fundraisers have never been successful enough that I haven't had to come out of pocket anyway. So it's not like I'm raising money with Kickstarter and then paying myself. With, I still have to come out and pay myself and my co-editor. So that came out on January 25th, including my only short story that came out in 2025 and my only edited anthology. And I am very happy to report, maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but I saw that Strange New Moons was listed, and I probably have to be circumspect about this, but I don't know what the rules are, and I'm not intending to overstate the case, so I'll just tell you flatly, and if anybody has a fucking problem, they can come find me, I guess. But I was very pleased to find that we were featured on the Bram Stoker reading list for the year, which is not to be confused with a nomination for a Bram Stoker or winning a Bram Stoker. I know people are very finicky about that stuff. So I'll be real clear. I don't know your etiquette. I was in the HWA for a year a little while ago. So, for one thing, that surprised me. I'm like, oh, I'm not in the HWA, and maybe more of the contributors were than usual. But it wasn't. I at least know it was not from me going around, glad handing people using my deep HWA connections, because I don't have them. So some people apparently liked the book enough to recommend it for the reading list. Again, not to be confused with a nomination or anything like that. And I also like to think that may have to do with what I was talking about a few minutes ago, about trying to bridge the gap between the UK and the US horror scenes, because I would guess, since this was more UK-centric, more of the UK HWA members would have voted for it. So that's cool, but also unexpected and not anything that I was going for. So it is, as opposed to, hey, I know I was making a big push for XYZ to get a, Shirley Jackson Award, and then we got it. I'm like, oh yeah, I worked really hard to get that. This kind of came out of the blue, so that was very cool. That kicked off, so like I said, that came out on January 25th, and the reason for that was to have something for the Dark Drafts Festival, which was my first convention of the year, and that was in Mount Joy, Pennsylvania, which is probably 20-30 minutes away from my house. So it was very cool to be able to go and just go home at night. It was at Booby's Brewery, and a lot of folks came out. A lot of the Books of Horror folks came out, and it was kind of an unusual venue for a con. So it's this supposedly haunted, and you know me, I don't believe in ghosts or paranormal or any of that shit, but it's this supposedly haunted brew pub in Mount Joy. So that was pretty cool. And that led right into, the next week, which is going to be similar this year, to Farpoint number 32, of which I've done, well, it's hard to say with because there's always that break due to the pandemic, but I would say I have been doing Farpoint since probably 2014. So this would have been my 11th Farpoint, probably less, at least the pandemic. So maybe this was my 10th Farpoint. I should go back and double check that, because that seems like a pretty impressive thing. But Farpoint is kind of a Star Trek convention. It's not the big Star Trek writers convention. That's Shore Leave, which I have also done, but I haven't done it in a while. And Farpoint, they still like me. They still invite me around. That's down in Baltimore, or more accurately, Pikesville, Maryland. It's not in Baltimore proper. So that is coming up in a couple of weeks here. I think Farpoint is February 1st or January 30th or something this year. Actually, if that's a weekend, it's probably both. So Farpoint is probably, it's probably January 30th to February 2nd, something like that. I'll double check on that. It'll all go up on my blog, but I will be doing that again this year. Farpoint was fun. I always just do a couple of classes, or rather presentations, and then an autograph signing. So we'll do that again. Then, you'll remember, I guess maybe I didn't do a video last year, but I published Millionaire's Day by Kit Power, who's a UK author, in autumn of 2024. And so Kit had it out, and I flew over there to, where was it, Manchester? Or Chester, rather. Chester, England, to do the UK release of Millionaire's Day. And then I told him, hey, if you can get over to the States, we'll also do a US release and, have some fun with that. Like I said, trying to kind of double the audience for myself and my authors. So he came out in late March and did a signing at Vortex Books and Comics, the very recently late and lamented Vortex, which I believe shut down about 10 days ago. But was still going strong in the spring of 25. So we went out, had a great signing with Kit, and that was right before Scares the Cares. So Scares the Cares, we did the big Millionaire's Day release. I also had a unique experience of hosting the Gross Out contest, which I've participated in every Gross Out contest, again, less the pandemic, although we also did some remote ones during the pandemic. But I've done every Gross Out contest since 2016 and won twice. And now I guess they're at the point where they're, instead of saying, hey, we'll give you a third one, they said, why don't you take over hosting duties? So I took over hosting duties with Wiley Young, who has won, I want to say, fucking never, because he sucks. Pretty sure never won. But now that he's hosting, he'll never be able to win, whereas I've won twice. So, sorry, it sucks to be you, Wiley. Anyway, we're going to be doing that again this year. More on that to come when I get a little bit out of holiday mode and, actually start worrying about Scares the Cares, Gross Out Contest, that stuff, which I'm going to have to start doing really soon. That was also the release of my novel for the year with Gavin Dillinger, which was called Looney. So we had Kit's U.S. debut with Millionaire's Day, which was a French press title. Gavin and I did our big debut of Looney, and Gavin was trying to undersell me the whole time at the con by selling the book for $14.99, where I was selling it for $15. But I think I still sold more than him, so again, fuck you, Gavin. A lot of fuck yous to my friends in 2025. Probably, as a result of what a fucking year it's been. But I'm just trying to focus on the positive right now. I'm looking at my notes here. We also did this Spirited Giving thing. Of course, Scares the Cares is a charity, function. And we also got to participate with Bitter Corella in doing a live action Midnight Pals at the Spirited Giving. It was me, Wiley, Brian Keene, Todd Kiesling, and Laurel Hightower. Did a live action Midnight Pals rendition. And, hopefully raised a little money for the charity. So that was fun. So that was the other release, was Looney. And then the next significant thing that happened, again, a new event for me, which I think I'll probably be doing again this year. I haven't entirely decided yet. I went to Gen Con, which my good friend Mary Fan has been doing since time immemorial, and always tells me to come, and I'm always like, yeah, I'm not driving to Indianapolis with books. And then this year, my good friend and mentor, Maurice Broadus, said, you need to come and be an instructor, because I've seen you instruct, at a lot of these conventions and stuff, and that's going to be good. So I went and did like 9 instructional panels. I love it. I love doing stuff like that. I love being able to keep brand new baby authors from making the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully not getting fucked in the ways that I've been fucked. It's one of the great joys of, being in the position that I'm in, of not being famous enough to where people are just like, what's your favorite color? But no longer being like quite a nobody, is that I could be like, hey, here's some useful, ground level kind of advice. So I've been invited to that again, when we get through the holidays and all that. I need to make the decision about, attending that. So I said a few minutes ago about, I'm trying with French Press, my personal imprint, to do a little less every year than most small presses. Like, some small presses are like, we're going to print out like 50 books this year, and if every book makes 50 cents, then, we all make, $2.50 or whatever. And I'm like, I think that's a terrible way to do business, because you need to think about the sunk cost of paying for a good cover, paying for good editing, paying for good marketing. So this year, I broke my own kind of tacit rule. I had a tacit rule that I only release one novel, or I should say, one work that's not by me per year. So if I release a novel by Summer Cannon, which I have, then I would not release a novel that year. I might release a collection, a short story, a novella, poetry collection, whatever. But when it comes time to worry about awards, marketing, that kind of thing, my sole focus for novels is going to be on Summers, not on my own. Because I know, even if I think I can not consider that a conflict of interest, I know in some kind of subconscious way it will be a conflict of interest. And you're always going to favor yourself, right? Like, so I'm like, if there was ever any choice where I was like, should I put down Summer or me? Some subconscious part of myself is going to say, well, put yourself down, fucker, So this year, so I've sort of been doing just one other thing from other people. This year, I went a little bit out of bounds and put out 2 things. So the first thing I put out was in September. Actually, let me look back at my notes here. So we talked about Looney, we talked about Strange New Moons. Yes, okay. So September 8th, I released Gifts Between Us, which is a beautiful, haunting, dark little novella by C.C. Adams, who a lot of you HWA folks will probably know from StokerCon. He is from the UK, he's from London, and this is a very London-centric story. It's universal, but it absolutely, as a sense of place, takes place in London. So I released that on September 8th. We did our big push on that. And then on October 13th, I want to say, we released, for the first time ever from French Press, a nonfiction book, which is Exploring the Labyrinth by Kit Power, who I talked about. We brought him over. We had the signing at Vortex. We had the big release at Scares the Cares. So that kind of just fell onto my plate. It was 2 items that I was kind of semi-committed to. One, I had signed the contract for Gifts Between Us, and then Kit said, well, what about this other book? And I said, well, when? Well, we've got to get it out by October if it's going to be a horror-themed book. So I felt like I blew way too much of my emotional and personal and financial capital on releasing 2 books that were not by me in 1 year. So I think we did right by both books. I think we did really good marketing pushes. And it's not like the marketing has ended. We're still marketing and pushing and everything, to this day, and we will keep doing that. And in some ways, we keep doing that for the books that we've released years and years ago. We're still giving opportunities to Summer Cannon, Brendan LaFaro, the Strange New Moons people and the Perfectly Fine Neighborhood people, and Gavin Dillinger and Stevie Kopis, who I've co-authored with. We keep pushing those things, but I also found that it was a lot. It's a lot to try and do two other people's works in a year, because I feel like I owe more to the authors that I've signed than I do to myself, which sounds ridiculous, but in a way, yeah, it's like anything. Like if you've promised to put your best foot forward and that there's somebody else keeping you honest, you will really do that. Whereas, if you just release something on your own, you can be like, well, I won't put as much effort, I won't put as much thought into it. So I wanted to do really well by both of those books, and it was draining. So I'm glad that I had that experience, because I think I've learned, don't do two in a year from now on. So French Press is going to stay pretty exclusively to one, signing one other author a year. So that may therefore not shock you that I have another announcement to make, and I'm not sure that I've made it publicly, but the signatures are all signed and the documents are all wet, so I think I can go ahead and announce it. But we have signed Matthew R. Davis from Australia. I know. I just said the whole thing about the UK and the US, and now I'm going completely out. But my God, guys, you have to read this fucking book. You have to read this fucking book when it comes out. It is incredible. And I looked at it, and I was like, I can't not sign it, which is exactly what I want, out of a novel. But yeah, we signed, or a novella. It's a novella in this case. But so I think just a few weeks ago, actually, we went through all of our open calls, and we ended up signing Matthew R. Davis. So cool. And he's going to be our big novella push for 2026. So much more to follow on that. And I guess I kind of jumped ahead, but the last thing that I did for this year was World Fantasy Con / British Fantasy Con, which was over Halloween, as a matter of fact, in Brighton, England. So that was actually nice because I stretched that out. I made it into a vacation with my wife, something I haven't been able to say yet. I should say our first vacation together as a married couple. So we flew out to Iceland for about a week. We did 3 or 4 days in Brighton, about a week in London, and then a weekend in York, which is up in the north of England, not quite to Scotland, but a very different vibe from London, which we've done before, and Brighton we'd never done before, but it's kind of like the Atlantic City to London's New York, if that makes sense. It's very much like, oh, well, here's a bunch of Londoners down at the seaside. I mean, there are Brightoners as well, I'm sure. I don't want to get anybody mad at me. Whatever. Yeah, we'll get the Brighton Tourism Bureau on my case. We're not all from London. But I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm pretty sure it's like everybody hops on the train from London, comes down to Brighton. But York, which is way up north, very different vibe, very different part of the country. You might compare it to something like California, Georgia, or something in the state. Like, it's just, it's a whole different thing. But at World Fantasy Con, we actually did our first in-person pitch session, and that was how I wanted to take pitches for this year. So in past years, we've had we've basically said, hey, open call for the next few weeks. I wanted to try doing a pitch session in person this year because I've seen this and I've seen it have, value. We did this other one. I'm not going to announce now because the paper, the ink is not dry. on the papers, and we have not officially signed. But I do think we're going to sign somebody else for 2027 from that pitch session. And then Matthew R. Davis came to us from being in the Strange New Moons. So sometimes it's, and like I said, Kit came back to me after he did Millionaires Day and said, hey, I have this nonfiction thing. So it's kind of like, once you're in the family, you have that connection, but then I also want to keep expanding the family by having pitch sessions. So I am actually going to be trying to have a few pitch sessions at Scares the Cares this year, or rather 2026, next year technically, as of 7 hours from now. So yeah, World Fantasy Con, came back from that, and that was pretty much my whole year in publishing. Like I said, it sounds like less than in past years. I know there's been years where I've put out 2 or 3 novels and a dozen shorts. Like I said, I was really burned out at the day job. I'm sure you can all infer what I'm talking about, and I'm sure a lot of you have had much, much worse times than I have, because it's just been a miserable fucking year. But I can't... It would be unwise for me to talk about it too much publicly. Although, actually... Was that publication? No, that other publication was in 2024. But I was a little more vocal than perhaps I should have been in a publication that came out in 2024. So you can probably just find that one. Michael Bailey published it. But yeah, overall, this is what I love about the new year. Even if everything has been crappy, you can kind of look forward to a blank slate. And if everything's been great, it's a great time to, look at your accomplishments. Oh, so speaking of accomplishments, I mentioned already about how Strange New Moons was shortlisted. I'm sorry. Oh my God, I can't say that. How Strange New Moons was put on the reading list for the Bram Stokers, which was very cool and very unexpected. And Millionaires Day, I don't think I'd mentioned this. One of the things I went over to Brighton for, Millionaires Day was nominated for a British Fantasy Award. Unfortunately, Kit did not win, but I was there to watch him not win and, pat him on the shoulder and all that sort of thing, and get to hang out with Cece, who we had just released his book, meet a bunch of other people over there. But it's really cool to see that level of success with what is a business that's essentially run out of my study, like this, to find that people think that we're like BFA worthy. We're like potentially, I don't want to say Stoker worthy. I'll just keep hemming and hawing about the whole Stoker reading list thing, because I know there are people, I'll just level with you, there are people that are big fucking dicks about it. So I'm not allowed to act like I'm excited and happy and announce it. And you'll notice I haven't announced it anywhere, except here, in context, where I don't think they'll be able to take anything out of context and say, oh, he said something he shouldn't have. But I've in the past been yelled at by people for saying, how dare you have the name Stoker in your whorish mouth. You think I'm kidding, but it has happened to me, so I'm once bitten, twice shy. I don't want to piss anybody off at the HWA, but for as much as I can say, thank you to all the HWA members that did vote for us. Strange New Moons was a labor of love, so it's really cool to see that there. Oh, and Mary San Giovanni was nominated. Oh, I'm sorry, was put on the reading list for her short Vargsangen, and I think Kaylee Dobbs, my co-editor, was on the reading list for short for that time of the month from Strange New Moons. So that's a lot of success, and of course, Kit's major success with the BFA nom. It's cool to be recognized in that kind of stuff. And I know people say, awards aren't everything, blah blah blah, but it's only after you have awards that you don't worry about them, I think. But where was I going with that? Oh, right. So you can take a chance to look back at your accolades and awards and the good things that happened over the year. This is what I love about New Year's Eve. You can look back at the good things. Hopefully the bad things start to fade into the memory. And then you can look forward to a blank slate for the next new year and start fucking things up almost immediately. But thanks for being with me. I like to try and do this every year. I know I probably haven't. I'm sure I've fallen down and failed at that. But thanks for joining me. I hope you all have a great time tonight. Go out to, parties and spend time with your loved ones and hit the ground running tomorrow. And if you're like me from Pennsylvania, of course, enjoy your pork and sauerkraut. Or if you're from the South, black-eyed peas. I don't know. Eat whatever you're going to eat for New Year's Day. And best wishes in the new year. And thanks, everybody. Have a good one.